Gonsalves, and I'm a recent graduate from the Masters of Social Work program at the University of Toronto, and I'm a registered social worker. And so today I'd like to talk about discrimination facing gay and lesbian seniors in long-term care, and on my experiences with being an openly gay man. So, to begin with, I want to tell you about a recent incident that occurred in British Columbia. So, Fraser Duke, a 52-year-old openly gay man, had a liver transplant, and he was recuperating in the University of British Columbia's hospital. One of the nurses on his floor asked Fraser to refrain from talking about his past life in front of his roommates. In her words were, "I'm not saying that we do not accept you, but be a bit quieter." Fraser, who's openly gay and recognized his rights, decided, "I'm not going to put up with this. I have rights like everyone else." And so he complained to the head nurse, which resulted in him being given an apology. My question to you, or something for everyone to think about: what if Fraser was a frail senior in a long-term care who had no supports, who could not advocate for himself or had no one to advocate for him? What would have been the response? So I'll give you a little background on how this topic came about. Like I said, I'm an openly gay man, and I've always talked to my friends about what happens to gay and lesbian seniors, or older gay males when they get older, or lesbians. Because in the gay community, I've experienced that we seldom see gay seniors. It's almost like they're hidden, or they moved to somewhere else. And so, while I was doing my MSW at University of Toronto, we had to do a systematic review, and it had to be on something that was not done before. And I have a passion for seniors. And so I talked to my two classmates into doing this research on gay and lesbian seniors being closeted or not closeted. And so they agreed. And my two classmates were Shayna Pilkins, Cassandra Rassinger. And so we all three of us did it. And Shayna, she decided on the name of the systematic review, calling it Silver Rainbow, which I thought was pretty smart. And we're hoping to publish this article eventually. But the systematic review was limited to lesbians and gays as opposed to lesbians, gays, bisexual, and transgender. Why? Because we felt that, as a group, and I, as a gay man, felt that the experiences of transsexuals and bisexual individuals are quite different. Even though they share some of the same discriminations, their experiences are quite different from what gay and lesbians face. And so a whole new reviews needed to be done on that. And that's why we chose just gay and lesbian. So for this systematic review and for this presentation, LG will mean lesbians and gays, and LTC will be long-term care. So about some facts and myths. Approximately 8% of adults are homosexuals. An estimated 2.8 million older adults in USA identify as LGB, lesbian, gay, and bisexual. And by 2030, 120 to 300,000 individuals will reside in long-term care. 2.6% of Canadians aged 55 and older identify as LGBT. And roughly a quarter of the Canadian population will be over 65 by 2036. About 1 million will be from the queer community, so LGBT. Right now, we have the largest number of LGBT individuals reaching retirement in history, and we know that will just increase as the baby boomers retire and as people are living longer. Discrimination and rejection. In order to understand how gay and lesbian seniors are reacting in long-term care, we need to understand how they live, their lived experiences. It's important to realize the historical period in which they were raised. the term homosexual was not used by healthcare professionals. Gays and lesbians were known as perverts or sexual deviates. Homosexuality was seen as unnatural, evil, and perverted. It was recognized as a mental illness in DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, until 1973. It was a criminal activity until 2003 in the US. It was classed as a sin, anti-family and immoral by religious groups, and a security risk and moral threat even today by the US military. What's the reality of the lives of gay seniors? That often they were ostracized by family members after they came out. So they were cut off. 3/4 of seniors have experienced some sort of victimization through abuse, loss of jobs, custody of children, and a place to live. Only a few or a limited amount of seniors are out. And when I say out, I mean living openly as gay or lesbians. They're out to just a few friends who are usually also homosexuals. Gay and lesbian seniors are less likely to have spouses or partners and more likely to live alone. They're 4 times more likely to not have the support of children, the number one source of caregiving. Which because they don't have children or family supports, it makes them even more so dependent on friends, long-term care, and living supports for help as they age and as they lose different kinds of disabilities, as the disabilities increase, either through health or physical ailments. Gay and lesbians face increased isolation and loneliness as they age because of lack of supports. What are the effects of lifelong discrimination? Many gay seniors have never come out, like I said. So they've never told anyone that they're gay except for a few individuals. And living closeted, we know, leads to poor self-image, often leads to poor self-image, depression, and emotional problems. So gay and lesbians always, because of the environment that they were raised, they've lived as they were straight, a term called passing. So they've been invisible to everyone but a few select people that they chose to tell, which really is a survival mechanism. A needs assessment in Canada and USA showed that seniors fear discrimination, and because of their lifelong discrimination, they expect similar treatments of discrimination in all settings. Gay seniors, because of discrimination, because of the expectation of receiving discrimination, will delay or refuse needed care. Fear of disclosing sexual orientation or being outed to healthcare individuals, and also fear of social isolation and social and emotional isolation in long-term care. So what were the findings of the systematic review? We had 4 themes: barriers to sexual expression, homophobia and marginalization, discriminatory practices and policies, inadequate HIV/AIDS support and interventions, and implications for policy and research. And I'll go through each one separately. So what are some of the barriers to sexual expression in long-term care? The heterosexist treatment. And this begins with even filling out the forms, because people are asked about husbands and wives. There's nothing about partners or significant others. They're asked about biological family members. There's nothing about family of choice, and I'll explain what family of choice is. The lack of inquiry or assessments regarding sexual practices, which people are not asked about their sexuality or even if they're sexually active, which leads to lack of information given regarding sexual needs. Lack of space and privacy in long-term care for sexual expression, and discrimination because of clothing worn expressing sexual orientation. So it's everything. Homophobia, marginalization in long-term care. Homophobia is the form of abuse and neglect from staff and abuse and neglect from staff and residents and family members because of their sexual orientation. Partners and families of choice excluded from care decisions. And when I say families of choice, I mean because most often gay and lesbian seniors were ostracized from their family members, They often choose a few friends or ex-partners as their family of choice, and there's no biological members have all the rights, family of choice doesn't. So they fear that sexual orientation may be offensive to others, which causes them to self-censor, or hide their sexual orientation. So they're watching what they talk about. They're watching about their past experiences. They're not sharing any information that people could get to know that they were homosexual. Lesbian and gay residents may prevent partners or friends from visiting for fear of discrimination, which leads to even more isolation and loneliness, and fear of social and emotional isolation from LG community when they go into long-term care. So what are the discriminatory practices and policies? Studies of social workers in New York describe staff attitudes as tolerant, uncomfortable, homophobic, negative, frightened, horrified, and not an issue. Another study reported that 55% of staff agree that homosexuality is unnatural. 13% agreed that lesbian and gay residents should not be allowed to reside in facilities, long-term care facilities or assisted living facilities. So lesbian and gay residents may not seek services or form relationships because of heterosexist attitudes and or discrimination. We know that in long-term care, seniors having sex is a taboo, not only for gay lesbian seniors, but for all seniors, despite knowing that sexuality does not decrease with age. The need for sex does not decrease with age, it just changes. Seniors are seen as asexual, and if you're asexual, you definitely can't be homosexual because you're not having sex. And sexuality in long-term care is often explored in the context of heterosexuality. So your partners are either husband and wife, or a female that you live with, or a male that you live with. Lesbians who experience less discrimination assume that it was because they were not out or they did not look gay, which says a lot for the people that are closeted. They're invisible. Lack of services tailored to the needs of lesbian and gay seniors. Lack of policies that incorporate sexual orientation into anti-discrimination policies. And some examples include brochures not portraying homosexual couples, long-term care facilities hiding LG-themed books or articles, and intake document focusing on heterosexual descriptions. Also, long-term care, you see no photographs of lesbian or gay couples hanging anywhere. And you seldom see volunteers or workers that are homosexual, so people have no one to identify with or even to feel like they can trust. Visiting practices, access to medical records, decision-making and caregiving abilities are often restricted to heterosexual notions of family, which are basically biological family members. Some examples of discrimination include ignoring lesbian and gay residents, doctors labeling safe-sex behaviors as a symptom of dementia, staff wearing gloves when entering into a resident's room, and staff refusing to bathe or perform any kind of personal care on residents. Service providers and physicians are largely unaware of LG seniors' needs, and training needs to improve access to services and to challenge assumed heterosexism. Recommendations include diversity, cultural competency, and sensitivity training. Another finding was the inadequate HIV/AIDS support and interventions, and challenges accessing long-term care is even more so difficult for people with HIV or AIDS. Experience of neglect, fear disclosing to doctors that they might be discriminated against or not be given any services, and lack of HIV education and training. It's still being seen in this today as a gay disease or something that happens to youth, which we know that a lot of seniors, heterosexual and homosexual seniors, are contracting HIV. What are the implications for policy and practice and research? And this is the most important part of the systematic review. LGBT friendly. Some seniors say that they want LGBT friendly facilities, and some want segregated living. LGBT sensitivity training programs would benefit staff and residents of care facilities. LGBT seniors have issues neglected by public researchers for years, so there's no research going on, hasn't been for the past 2 decades, and very limited research is happening right now. Seniors need safe care environments and decreased assumptions of sexuality during the intake process. We need the intake process to become more inclusive. Education and awareness raising to improve services and access, and policies that prohibit discrimination and mandate staff training and service provision implemented and enforced. We know that long-term care is accredited by the Ministry of Community and Social Services, so we need more checks and balances as to whether training is being done in long-term care to support lesbian and gay seniors, but not only lesbian and gay seniors, all seniors. We need a zero tolerance of discrimination by staff, residents, or family members. So it should not be accepted. We need to understand the advantages and disadvantages of lesbian, gay, bisexual friendly, or long-term care or segregated long-term care. So we need to know, is there any benefits, or what are the benefits? And from talking to friends, I know that a lot of people don't want segregated. We don't want to live apart of, be separated from the heterosexual community. Not all heterosexual people are discriminating against homosexuals. So, and our family members and friends might also be heterosexual. So we don't want to be separated. We want rights. We want people to be treated with respect and dignity. That's what we want. We need services and activities in long-term care to meet the needs of lesbian and gay seniors, and institutional policies recognizing and supporting the rights of partners and families of choice. Recommendations again include diversity, cultural competency, and sensitivity training. And like I said, we need a definition of elder abuse to include homophobia and harassment based on sexual orientation, because this will make administrators of long-term care and owners accountable. We know that most long-term care facilities are privately owned. So owners and administrators need to be accountable for the people that live in their facilities. We need lesbian and gay activists to advocate for changes to health, social service, and long-term care systems, and to provide education. We need the sexual needs and identity a mandatory part of assessment and care plans. How could you make services tailored to the identity of people if you don't know what their sexual needs are? If you don't understand their lived experience, how can you make their services appropriate? We need to develop outreach, improve communication, and adapt assessments to meet the needs of lesbian and gay seniors. We need privacy in long-term care, which is a major, major obstacle to expressing sexuality. Most people are in a shared room with a partition, which is not conducive to people expressing their sexuality. And because people feel that sexuality ends when people become seniors, it's suppressed. Sexuality is suppressed. It's not allowed. People are not allowed to hold hands, to show any form of emotion. We need lesbian and gay community to raise awareness of seniors facing discrimination. We need the gay community to understand what's happening to seniors. The baby boomers, a lot of them are out, and we're heading now towards retirement. We don't know what's going to happen if we're going to face any kind of disability that will cause us to end up in long-term care. We need to do something. We cannot just sit back and say, well, we know that people are suffering from discrimination and do nothing about it. The gay community need to educate people. They need to get involved. We need facilities that include lesbian and gay staff and volunteers, visibly open to all sexuality, so people will know, even if they're closeted, that okay, maybe I can speak to this person, or I know that this person understands how I feel. We need policy changes to increase access to care and treatment for HIV positive seniors. And lastly, I'd like to read an example of discrimination in long-term care. In one example, an openly gay man in a nursing home was regularly the target of protests from other patients and their family members on his floor. The facility moved him to a floor for patients with severe disabilities and or dementia. Without any family or friends to advocate for him, he eventually hanged himself. And that's one of the problems in long-term care, is that because people lack training, because people don't know how to deal with discrimination, because there are not policies and rules to direct them how to react, people, when people face discrimination, the homosexual person is removed. So they're removed from the environment as opposed to teaching people how to live with them. So removing them, they face even more isolation and discrimination. So that was my talk. I'd like to open it now to a discussion period and to answer any questions people may have. And there are a few questions that I have here, but we can start with any questions.
Thank you very much for that talk. It's very interesting. I wanted to just, I've seen your research before, but I think if you could just talk a little bit about this idea that it's the reclausitization. So
Okay.
if you can just, I think that's a really important point. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, we know that a large percentage of gay and lesbian seniors are not out to begin with, so they're invisible. But what's happening now is that because of lack of support, because of people who can advocate for them, because of seniors being frail in long-term care, people who were out and who have lived all their lives openly as gay or lesbians are now, in order to receive care, going back into the closet. So, people feel like they have no choice. It's not only that people are invisible, which is huge, but it's sad that when people need care and support, that they feel that they can't trust anyone, or in order to receive services, they need to be closeted. Otherwise, people might not want to shower them. Doctors might treat them with disrespect. Staff in long-term care might might remove them if they face discrimination, and so that's why people are being closeted. And so we need to deal with this, and we need to deal with this through policies and stricter adherence to rules. We need to develop policies that will promote a zero tolerance, but we also need to, like I said, we need training. We need training for gay and lesbian seniors, so that staff of gay and lesbian seniors, so they can understand people's lived experience and what they're going through. Sorry. Go ahead.
I commend you for your passion, your commitment.
Thank you.
I have a few comments, and my overarching concern, if you're going to publish, I think you should look a little more carefully Canadian data, and particularly Ontario. And there isn't, under law, you can no longer in a care institution deny family members, LGBT family, however they define it, to be excluded from care decision. Dr. Philip Berger led the charge on that. You, under the Law Commission of Ontario, if you look at capacity, consent, power of attorney, power for care, that issue in Ontario has been settled.
Right.
So you cannot, in the United States, maybe some other provinces, and it does, long-term care, does come under the Ministry of Health and long-term
Right.
care. And I should explain, I'm a part of the Senior Pride Network.
Right.
Here in Toronto, and we have fabulous example, which my seatmate here, I just discovered, turns out to be on the advisory committee of Funcher House, which is the leading example of gay-friendly long-term care. The staff are trained, the commitment is clear, the community engagement from the LGBT community is there. What's the one?
But if I can just say something briefly about that.
True
because-
Davidson Acres is the other. So my concern, I think you've raised a lot of really good questions, but if you're going to publish, I think it's crucial for a Canadian
Yes.
audience.
Well,
Might be helpful.
and I agree with you, but when we were doing the systematic review, there's very limited research on Canadian data, very limited. And the
aware.
majority of research is done in the US, unfortunately, in Australia, and some in Europe. Most other countries, there's almost no research on gay and lesbian seniors. And you mentioned True Davidson. In Toronto, we have 10 gay and lesbian facilities run by the city.
Yep.
3 are gay friendly, or supposedly gay friendly, which are True Davidson, that you mentioned, Fudger
Fudger.
House, and Kipling Acres. But the majority of long-term care are privately owned.
No.
Nursing homes are, they can have some charitable, ownership. They're all funded by the Ministry of Health. Retirement homes,
Okay,
there's
so
I know there's that
my
confusion.
correction.
So I know we talk about long-term care. So if we look at retirement homes, they are indeed privately owned, but long-term care facilities, nursing homes, as we would have said, or chronic care facilities, are publicly funded and come under the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care. I just wanted to say something about Fudger, because I obviously have a personal commitment.
Connection.
I think it's seen that they're doing really quite a good job, and I must say that this is a very unusual story, but the gentleman who is the president of the Residents' Council just was interviewed, as he often is, by 16:9 or Global. I just saw the clipping of it, and it was called Back in the Closet. But this gentleman, who is 85, moved into Fudger at age 80. Had not been openly out. He said family members and close friends, but not in his wider society. And when he moved into Fudger, he did become open. It's just a wonderful story, and I wish we had more of them. But I do recommend that people want to see. It's just on this whole issue of.
And I did read about that.
Yeah, and this, as I say, this TV interview. So I think there is some hope at the end of the tunnel, but it is slow going.
It's a huge issue.
But and I agree.
And
I agree with a lot of the points you
completely
said.
agree
But
with
I still,
Oh, it's huge.
we still need to understand that Toronto is very accepting. But what happens when you go out of Toronto? What
Oh,
happens when you go to small towns or other places that have no gay and lesbian communities, that people are just shut off from all access?
Yep.
What happens to them?
Oh, I think what you're saying is very true.
Yeah.
I think it's just to get a little bit of balance in terms of what is actually examples of what is happening in Toronto.
Go ahead, then.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I'd like to hear everybody's comment on this. Like, the 3 homes that you're speaking of they're isolated. They're gay, lesbian communities, which means we still haven't cracked Bancroft, as it were. I'm just using
They're
that
not
as
isolated.
No.
but what I mean is that we put all the gay lesbian people together, pretty much. There's a few different people in there, but we have not. If you go to apply to I know that.
Okay.
If you go to apply to Bancroft and you say you're gay or lesbian, there may be a problem. And I can tell you for a fact at Princess Margaret Hospital where people die, this is an important issue, people die. People are dying, and the staff there will say, we did a research study there, and they would say, no, I am not going to care for somebody who's gay or lesbian. I'm not going to. And so get somebody else. Get somebody who is not against your religion or whatever the reason. We had a bunch of reasons. And so you say, well, wait a minute, you work here. What are you doing? You don't have a right to say, I don't feel like treating this patient because I don't like their sexuality. And that's the kind of issue I'm asking about. Why not?
Yes.
That's what we need to deal with more. This is just my own opinion. I need to hear what other people think. I think we need to deal with that more fundamentally, where people are even denied the right to die in an environment that matters to you. And you do die in a nursing home too.
Yes.
If I could just add, I think most people have not even thought about the issue. That's the bigger problem. And that when they're faced with it, they don't, people, healthcare professionals or whoever we're talking about don't have the necessary training or even capacity at that time to do anything about it because they're just faced with something they haven't even thought about. So
I mean, if you look at most long-term care staff are basically PSW staff that are doing the personal care. They're the frontline staff for seniors, and they're the ones lacking the education and training.
Right.
But part of the problem, Ron, is that their value system from their religion absolutely does not allow them to care for those kind of people, they would say. And you look at them and you say, but this is a job, and you're a professional. And so how do you change people's morals? This is more fundamental than, well, we're going to give you a lecture on homosexuality and all the rest of it, right?
That's why we need
It's not
training.
going to change your views at all.
That's why we need training. We need sensitivity training. We need diversity
How do
training.
how do we change values?
What we need. But if we can change values, if someone's going to say that my religion prevents me from serving with you, then you can't work here.
That's what
You got
should
it.
be
You
said.
cannot work
Thank
here. You got to leave. There's a zero discrimination policy. You either accept that we live here or you leave.
That's right.
You
But
cannot
we don't
work here.
do that.
But see, here's the other problem. Sorry
What's
to
the other
interject.
Yeah,
is
right,
that
right. This is interesting and important.
if we're labeling long-term care homes or retirement homes or hospitals or whatever as gay friendly, that automatically means that other places may be gay
Not
unfriendly.
friendly. That's what I was
Right?
trying to say.
So why do we even have to have the
That's what I was
conversation about
trying to
something being gay friendly or gay unfriendly?
That's right.
Why can't, so the zero tolerance thing comes in because then it could be, well, we're Muslim unfriendly or Christian
Yes,
unfriendly
yes.
or we're Muslim friendly.
Yeah,
Why do we even
yeah.
have to have that?
We
Why?
shouldn't have any.
So if this is the profession, for instance, that you've chosen, this is what your responsibilities are to the person,
That's
regardless of sexual orientation or past
Or
life
race or
whatever,
culture.
race or
Exactly. That's
Religion,
exactly.
yes.
I think the fact that we're having the conversation where we're talking about segregation and gay, something being gay friendly, that too is problematic, right? So I don't know. That's my opinion about it, but that creates the further segregation.
We need
right?
to recognize people's rights more than just saying a place is gay friendly. We need to recognize rights and put policies in place to protect people. But going back to the city and True Davidson and the city's 10 residences that are run by the City of Toronto, 10 long-term care residents, I know that the City of Toronto developed the LGBT toolkit, and that has some great stuff. And I know that Fudger House, in accessing long-term care, the questions that they ask, they don't. It's not heterosexually focused. So they're asking for partners, families of choice, as opposed to whether you have a wife or a husband. But my thing is, I did visit Fudger House, and I did talk to the administrator there, which was very nice, and I did see a lot of good stuff at Fudger House. I was just, I was told that there were 8 openly individuals at Fudger House. I'm not sure if that's correct, and that I wonder about. If there's eight individuals that are openly gay at Fudger House, 3 blocks from the gay community, basically, are people still closeted? That's my question.
It's interesting because the Senior Pride Network that was said I'm part of, we meet at Fudger House, and we've had more than 8 different people come to the meetings from people living there. And we've had people, a woman, I remember, a former nurse, saying it wasn't until she got into Fudger House, she came out, her son disowned her, but she had finally felt, at she was mid-80s, she had a community, but she spoke about the whole Fudger.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't feel she was limited. And there are quite a number that
That's
we
good.
have met when we met there, because they come down to the meetings. It's hard to tell, but I think I agree with you. The difference was under Sandra Pitters, former head of the long-term care home, she set up the protocol for training staff. The trouble is, your staff changed, your PSWs changed, they're poorly paid, they tend to be immigrant women, exploited to beat the band. And if you can't consistently keep the training going, you've got one heck of a problem. And
Well,
I think this is the issue. And
Well,
if
we
you
need-
could mandate, but even if you mandate, when you go into training in long-term care, supposedly staff free for training, they go in and out of the room. It's so hard.
I have worked in residential services for adults and children with mental and intellectual disabilities for 24 years, and training is mandatory, and staff just don't go in and out. Training is mandatory. You either get the trainer or you can't do the job,
Yeah.
and that's how it has to be treated. You get the training or you can't do the job. If you don't get the training, then I'm sorry, you can't have services. Just a second, but the biggest thing is that we don't, when seniors stop working, when people stop working, we don't see them as contributing members of society. So we think that they've lost all their worth when they stop working, which is nonsense. Just look, you mentioned that long-term care has people who are, some long-term care pay good dollars, but the amount of work that people have to do in long-term care, the PSWs have to do, high burnout. We need to increase funding. We need to make more staff available in long-term care. The less staff we have, the more experiences of discrimination we'll get.
No, I do agree with her, that lady. And religion and values, they play a big role. I work in long-term care, and we did have training, lots of training in different topics, and people did go to training because it was mandatory. They didn't go in and out, but they did go. But then, they were making jokes, the residents. So it's necessary, but it's not enough. Even if you train, there's something that we need to change the dynamics of the places, policies. I'm not sure what it is, because people won't change their religion, and that's fine. But religion is so strong in certain people that we say in Spanish, el rosario en los ovarios, the rosary in your ovaries. So that it's so, it's so in your flesh for certain people that even if you have so much training, things will remain the same.
But that's why we need to have a
Well, yeah, but how? That's my question.
If people are discriminated against, they lose their jobs. If we make, like I said, if we make part of the discrimination of elder abuse, discrimination against sexual orientation, also we need to add that to it. It will make people accountable. Like, you cannot just discriminate. You could be charged if you discriminate against someone. You should be charged if you discriminate
But
against
if it
someone.
was somebody that was a black patient, and
That's
they
right.
discriminated
That's
against
right.
a black patient,
That's right.
or
So why is it acceptable
Jewish
for gay and
patient, or
lesbians?
whatever, you'd lose your job in the next.
That's right. So why is it acceptable for gay and lesbian
is it an
seniors?
exception?
Well, I think that training doesn't change people's values and beliefs, like you're saying, but when there's
Their
consequences.
practice.
They can make them be
But the
more
practice
professional.
can be, accommodating.
Part of the
I think it's a long-term culture change where we start doing things like this that raises awareness, but, as long as there's consequences for not following your scope of practice or whatever, then, we'll see change. I think.
Yeah.
I think so.
And I think part of it too is because, social workers, doctors, psychiatrists, all the healthcare professionals, get such limited training or understanding of the lived experience of gay and lesbians. So they don't understand how to react to them. Or they might be even embarrassed. Or they might be just, homophobic. So we need more education, but once again, we need zero tolerance.
I'm such a pain in the.
Go ahead.
I love your idea of including this in elder groups. I think it's fantastic. But I'm sitting here like trying to figure out how to do that, thinking that we just, we're doing a national study right now, a national prevalence study, and we never ever asked anything or did anything about this. And now I'm feeling really bad in terms of how could we have done this?
Go ahead.
In your conference in May,
Right.
have it on the agenda.
Okay.
What are you doing in May, Ron?
No,
Hey,
but,
May,
I
we
mean,
got you.
I think that's crucial. I am involved with Elder Abuse Ontario, and I know the new chair, head, whatever. I can certainly go to him. They had a conference in 2 weeks ago.
They have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, again, they say, and I challenged them on this, I asked them, do you deal with elder abuse in long-term care? They said, no. We deal with it in the community. The other thing you might like to know, there is a terrific research project up at York, and I think McGill is involved, looking at long-term care for the LGBT community in the home. So it's home care, and their project is fantastic. So like you, they're bringing issues to the fore, which I think is
That's great.
well worth it. And I think they're completing their study this spring sometime, but they've really done a lot
That's
of work.
great if we could provide more support to people in their homes, because
Exactly.
people are going into nursing homes just because they need a little bit of support.
Yeah.
And if they get support at home, then they don't have to go into long-term care to be
Yeah.
dependent on long-term care. So that's great.
Yeah.
So if we're doing the nice May 28th meeting is about social isolation. We're not calling it that. We're calling it engaged or engaging to go on to the positive side. And part of being GBLT is being socially isolated as a result of
Definitely.
discrimination and other things. So I think that's a great idea. And we will add a group about that, don't you think?
Good.
I think it'll be good.
Great.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
Is there any more questions? Let me see if we have. I'd like to ask you this. What do you think that about baby boomers? Will they become closeted in long-term care?
Some, yeah, some will.
Well, again, it all depends on supports and if you have any kind of supports or people advocating for you or the need you need on services. If you're frail and you have no supports or anyone to advocate for you and you can't for yourself and you need these services, you will shut up.
Especially rural, as you said.
And I think, like I said before, we need the gay community to become more involved. I mean, we just can't stand aside and just leave it up to, like, we didn't get this far by people standing idle. We got this far by the community fighting for our rights. And we're going to only take it to the next level if we continue to fight and not to become complacent or to become comfortable in where we are right now in Toronto, because there's a whole world out there. Go ahead.
Have you been trying to offer this presentation to long-term care?
No, I haven't done anything. I just finished my MSW last June. I just graduated in November, and
Do you think residents will come to hear you?
Well, you should go
I
to
hope
them.
so.
If not the residents, at least the people who are working
Well,
there.
I mean, it would be I think
discriminatory as well.
Yeah, sure.
I think a presentation on discrimination in long-term care will be helpful to any long-term care organization, an assisted living facility, because we still have this idea that if someone does not openly say that they're gay, it means that there's no gay people. I called several places when I was doing this. I wanted to come and talk to them about it. And the only place that really accepted me was Fudger House. Unfortunately, in Toronto. And also, I was told when I called, oh, we have no gay and lesbian seniors. And I don't want to mention the long-term care, but we have no gay and lesbian seniors living here. And I said, that you know of. She said, and I said, what would you do if you did have gay and lesbian seniors? She said, well, we have the rainbow flag hanging in our place. I mean, the rainbow flag means nothing to people who don't know what it is, and to assume that there's no homosexuals in a long-term care just because they don't self-identify is doing a disservice to people.
That is just because there's no one there right now doesn't mean that there won't be there someone tomorrow. So you should be prepared.
But if you look at statistics, if 8% of adults are LGBT, 8% of the long-term care might be LGBT, whether they're closeted or not. Yes?
The other thing, I'm sorry, I picked on you.
Oh, you pick on me, you always do.
Sorry. No, I'm teasing. Ontario Long-Term Care Association has a regular meeting. OMAS, the nonprofit Ontario Association Nonprofit Housing Services for Seniors, they have an annual meeting. I think the key, get on those agendas, because the more the issue gets raised, repeated, the more likely we are to affect.
Well, I'd hopefully like to share contact with you, because you have a lot of information, but you have a lot of information that would be beneficial. And I'm also on the SPN. I just joined the SPN.
Oh,
so
great.
Yes. So
Great.
if we could share information, would be great.
Sorry, senior private.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
We actually know about
Out
that.
of 519, we
Yes.
Yeah, you should be joining nice. You should be starting a group at nice.
Yeah.
You should. We have theme teams at we have 9 of them. Ethnicity and aging. Why don't we have something on property?
Sure.
Why don't we? Let's think
See
about
what you've started?
That's why we have these meetings.
That's great. I'm
Well
54
done.
years old. You
Well
know,
Let's
done.
start doing some
I might be
research.
in long-term care. Who knows? Hopefully not.
Sorry,
But
I'll be there before you.
well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for listening.
Well, we wait for you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they could. Sure. I mean, I don't see anything. Everything is.
I don't.
Yeah, noted. So, yeah.
Hi, people from FST says hi. How are you? So Liz and Carlos, I was talking to them today.
Yeah.
With regards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, great.
Are you working?
No. Oh,
Yeah. My car. My car is on this. Anyway, you just keep taking. Oh, yes.
I didn't answer your question.
I won't get over people's values. We did for women. So why can't we do this now? We can.
But you know, my big concern, and I tried to get the permission to They are the worst. The bias, the bias aren't hitting the same way.
It's not as bad as
No.
ours.
I had a guy in the class, and then when you're sure, I want to. Discrimination is part